Sentire Media.
Welcome to the Stop Italian Sounding podcast, uncovering authentic Italian food. I'm your host, Robert Campana, and join me as we delve into the rich heritage of genuine Italian food, exploring its legends, history, and traditions. Through important tips and insightful interviews with industry professionals, you'll gain a deeper understanding of authentic Italian food. Welcome back, everyone, to the Stop Italian Sounding show, uncovering authentic Italian food. So, for today's show, I want to talk about, again, the Mediterranean diet, but not in the same way that I've discussed it in the past. Today, I want to talk about something that's extremely important about the Mediterranean lifestyle. And of course, if you've been listening to the show, you know that the word diet, I mean it as the word lifestyle. So I want to talk about something that's extremely important to this diet, um, where if you were to eliminate the thing that I'm about to talk about, the entire diet wouldn't work. Of course, we're talking about the base of the diet, because the base of the diet, when you look at the Mediterranean food pyramid, of course, is the most important thing. However, the base of the Mediterranean diet food pyramid actually is not food. Instead, we're talking about social practices. We're talking about habits that people could have. And by the way, these habits that I'm about to discuss today could fit into any culture around the world. So when I say Mediterranean diet, I don't mean specifically a diet that is strictly linked to the Mediterranean, because we look at places like Japan, for example, which is extremely far away from the Mediterranean, and they have social practices that are quite similar. So anyway, of course, I'm talking about things such as conviviality, tradition, seasonality, sports, so physical activity, togetherness, education, and zero waste. These are all things that are fundamental for the Mediterranean diet, for it to actually stay up and work. And one thing I love about this lifestyle is that it's not a list of things that you could eat and things that you should avoid. You could literally eat everything. It's just, how does it fit into the puzzle of what you eat daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly? So anyway, let's talk a little bit about these social practices that, again, that are fundamental to this way of living. Um, so the traditional food pyramid becomes social and it's presented, let's just say, as a lifestyle, like I said before, and it's good not only for people, but it's also good for the planet as well. So we're talking about the first things such as conviviality. So conviviality is friendship between people, the bond between people. Let's just say people that grow up in the same, not only the same family, but the same type of culture, but not even. It could be different cultures that they bond over similar things. So friendship, brotherhood, if you will, sisterhood, if you will. But that fact of being together is extremely important for the Mediterranean diet. And if we think about 2025, our day and age, and who lives over here, who lives far, who lives in another country, we could still practice conviviality, because we have WhatsApp, we have FaceTime, we have video chats, we could call people, we could talk to people. So it's not like it was when my grandparents were younger, for example, where they had to send letters. It's totally different now. So we are able to practice this across nations. And that leads me to my next point. My next point is tradition, because typically when people, if you have friends, you have family, grow up together, you create this bond throughout the years, and then you tend to create traditions, practice traditions, create your own traditions within family, but also practice traditions that maybe are socially followed, for example. And we're talking about the depository of a cultural heritage. And we think of Italy, because of course I focus everything on Italy. That's what the show's about. But we talk about these traditions that are centuries old traditions, and that link people together. There's that human aspect. There's that relationship aspect, and it makes you good that you're following along the line of what your parents did, what your grandparents did, what their parents did, so on and so forth, while creating and innovating new traditions along the way. And of course, traditions also mean that you could splurge every once in a while, and you could eat that that food that might not be quote unquote the healthiest, but it makes you feel good because you're sharing the moments with other people. And that's very important. And when it comes to food, we're talking about the practice also of seasonality. That's the third lifestyle practice that I want to talk about, seasonality, because consuming seasonal products not only means that you are probably getting a much tastier food. For example, I think of a tomato that's consumed in season, much tastier. But it also means that you're consuming less preservatives, and it's also better for the earth. We're reducing environmental pollution. So seasonality also makes you feel good as well. These are all things that should make you feel good. These are habits that should make the person feel better about him or herself as they're living, and they're also quite easy to start to implement in your life. I talked about so far three things: conviviality, tradition, and seasonality. And you say, how do I implement conviviality? Well, just bond with other people, whether it's actually in person or whether it's, you know, at remotely, which is possible. It's better in person, but remotely is the next step. We have that possibility. So anyway, the fourth lifestyle practice I'd like to talk about is physical activity, because physical activity is obviously everybody knows that it's important, but I think they kind of freak out when somebody says, you have to go to the gym. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to spend hours at the gym. It could literally mean, 20 minutes at a gym session, or not even, it could be a walk outside, some sort of physical activity above your normal daily activity. Okay. So if you normally, like, you get up, you cook dinner and you wash the dishes, yes, you're moving, but that's your normal habit. I'm talking outside of that. So it could be going to the gym. It could be playing sports a few times a week. It could just simply be going for that walk after lunch or after dinner. But building that into your life, building that as a non-negotiable habit in your life. So we talked about conviviality, we talked about tradition, we talked about seasonality, and physical activity. The next thing are also very effective concepts. We're talking about togetherness. Togetherness, which is a little different than conviviality, because togetherness meaning you're actually completing a task together. You're working together in order to do something. And in this case, since we're talking about food, we're specifically talking about cooking together. Everybody, adults, children, everybody plays a role in the kitchen. If you're making pasta, have your kids go and grate the Parmigiano Reggiano, for example, all working together for a few reasons. Number one, because it's obviously important to consume real food and to partake in this quote unquote creation together, but also because we're talking about a heritage, in this case, the Mediterranean diet, that must be obviously preserved. And in order to preserve it, you could talk about it, but you specifically have to renew it day in and day out. You have to practice it every day. And you have to do that together with other people, because if you do it by yourself, you're not going to transmit that value to the other people, and transmitting it to kids when they're younger. So when they get older, they understand that it's an important thing and shouldn't be lost. So togetherness, again, extremely important, and that leads me to the next thing, which is teaching to other people. So education, not only in the kitchen, but education in the institutions. We're talking about in the schools, for example, because this is something that we have to learn. It's a very sustainable way of living. Again, and it doesn't mean that just because it's called the Mediterranean diet. Again, it's because it was codified in the Mediterranean area, but again, this is something that could be implemented everywhere around the world. These habits are not specific only to Mediterranean countries. These are habits that you could implement in every single nation. So education, we have to bring this lifestyle to school. We have to talk about its culture, the value, the history, everything about this, because food education, of course, shouldn't be a list of things that oh, you could eat this, you can't eat that, a restrictive list, for example. But it should be, in my opinion, a reflection on food and how this food fits into the daily puzzle of your daily intake of food. And last but not least, we talk about, again, something that probably everybody would agree with, is zero waste. Don't waste food. Wasting food, and we're talking about millions and millions of people around the world, hundreds of millions of people around the world that don't have access to food. So I know, people grow up, their parents say, don't waste food because in other parts of the world, they have nothing to eat. But that's very wise. We've heard it many, many times growing up. and we actually have to follow it. If you happen to have leftovers, which is very possible, eat it the next day. Maybe repurpose it in a different way. Maybe use it in a different recipe. I'm thinking about, I don't know, if you make too much pasta, why don't you make a frittata with the pasta next day? A frittata con gli spaghetti. Um, I often think of, let's just say, I think of cucina povera, so poor cuisine, as it's called in Italian, cucina povera, like poor man's food. Poor man's food isn't so how could I say this? Maybe I should reframe poor man's food, cucina povera, to cucina intelligente, so intelligent cuisine, the intelligent food, the intelligent way of eating, because our ancestors back then in Italy, yes, they followed what we call cucina povera today, but they were very keen on zero waste. They didn't waste anything because they had to eat. So they know. I want to rephrase the term cucina povera with cucina intelligente. So if you're on board, start calling it that, because I think it's a very, very smart thing. And it's very wise to teach to other people, again, because there are millions of people around the world that don't have food, and it's obviously our moral duty to avoid food waste and to make sure that food arrives even to obviously people who don't have it. So anyway, today again, I just wanted to talk about the base of the Mediterranean diet, which has nothing to do with food but social practices. These are social practices that are extremely important, not only to the human being but also for the earth. And also, without these practices, you can't fully live the Mediterranean lifestyle, because again, this is the base, and without this, everything falls down. So, with that being said, how could you implement these practices into your daily life? Well, you start small. Obviously, you don't focus on, well, you can focus on the big picture, but you don't get too hung up on the big picture. You take small steps every day in order to work in conviviality or specific traditions. And guess what? If you didn't grow up with any traditions, that's fine as well. You could create your own traditions, or you could associate yourself with people who do have traditions. And that leads into the conviviality portion of things as well. Try and eat seasonal. I know in the United States, it's very difficult to do that. But when you go to the supermarket, you buy Whole Foods, and you can buy things that are in season in a normal American supermarket. You could also buy a lot of things that are out of season, but that means that either they're genetically modified or they've traveled thousands and thousands of miles and probably won't taste good as something in season. But it is possible. So you try and work these slowly but surely every day, non-negotiable, you have to tell yourself. And then you focus on progress and not perfection, because if you focus on being perfect, then it's going to be much more difficult to reach that. So with that being said, again, the base of the Mediterranean diet is something that we should all strive for before we delve into everything else. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the stories of authentic Italian cuisine. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more insights and interviews. Also, feel free to reach out with your thoughts or questions on our social media channels at Stop Italian Sounding or on our website, stopitasounding.com. Grazie a tutti e alla prossima.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.